I'm currently 20 years old and I've been Catholic for pretty much my whole life. Now, as I grew up Catholic, there were 3 mistakes that I made, which I only realized over this past year, and since I've overcome these, my faith has gotten a lot stronger. And so I hope I can help you to avoid making these same mistakes that I made, so let's get into the video. Now, the first mistake that I made was I didn't take the Eucharist seriously enough. And I think this is a very common mistake that a lot of people make, especially other Catholics who grew up Catholic just like me. And I think the reason is because when you grow up Catholic, you've probably been to church a lot of times, especially if you go every single week and during Easter and Christmas. But here's the thing, the more you do something, the more it starts to become like a habit or a routine. And then if that's the case, then that thing that you do, when you're doing it, you start to not think too much while you're doing it. You start to not think too much of it. Because I've been taking the Eucharist for a very long time and for many years now, whenever I would go to Catholic Mass and whenever I would be lining up about to receive the Eucharist, I would just kind of be thinking about other things or be distracted in my thoughts instead of focusing on what I'm doing in the present moment. And that being, I'm about to take the Eucharist, the body of Christ. And so when I would receive it, I would just kind of be doing it and taking it. And then I'd walk back to my chair and pray, and then that was it. And it's not that I wasn't taking it seriously, it's just that I wasn't taking it seriously enough. Even one time, I think I saw someone putting their hands in their pocket while walking back to the chair after receiving the Eucharist. But the more I grew in my faith and the more that I learned about God and thought about the Catholic Mass and the Eucharist, the more it kind of hit me and I realized oh, okay, I've got to be taking this more seriously. The Eucharist is literally the body of Christ. What I do now is when I'm in line and when I'm actually receiving the Eucharist at Catholic Mass, I try to get rid of other distracting thoughts in my head and I try to focus on the task at hand, which is I'm about to receive the body of Christ. And so now I try and take it and receive it with a lot more respect and a lot more reverence. And I try to put more kind of my thought into it. I try to appreciate that it is the body of Christ. What I think you should do from now on, if you made the same mistake that I did, when you are about to receive the Eucharist, try to put more thought into it. Try to have more respect and have a deeper appreciation for what you are about to receive, and that being the body of Christ. Now, the second mistake that I made was I didn't really understand or even try to understand why I was going to church. And before you skip this part, okay, Jeremy, it's so obvious. Of course, you should understand why you go to church. Hear me out. A lot of Catholics don't really understand why they do go to church. And that's why some people might only come to Catholic Mass, come to church, once a year and on Christmas. And that's a big mistake. That's a big problem. Because imagine it like this. Imagine if you had a friend and you only go and visit them once a year on their birthday to say happy birthday, and then you don't talk to them for the rest of the year. I mean, that's essentially what it's like when you go to Catholic church only on Christmas and then you don't spend time with God or go to any other Catholic masses throughout the rest of the year. But why is going to church important? I mean, there's so many different reasons, but probably the biggest reason is we go to church so we can obviously worship God, worship Jesus Christ, but so we can receive the Eucharist. And this kind of links back to the first point, right? And if you all remember COVID-19 when, it was all pretty intense and it was locked down and we had to stay and isolate ourselves in our homes and we couldn't go to Catholic Mass for quite a while. We had to do online Mass, and during that time, we couldn't receive the Eucharist. But here's the thing, since lockdown has finished and since we've kind of moved back to normal life pretty much, I still know some people who are still in the habit of doing online Mass and they don't go to actual Mass in person. Why is that a problem? Well, you're not receiving the Eucharist. You're not receiving the body of Christ, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, and the main reason why you should be going to church, so you can receive the Eucharist and receive the body of Christ. And this is kind of what I'm saying when some people don't understand why you're going to church. And if you don't understand why you're going to church, then in the future, it might be the thing that kind of makes you stop going to church. And that's why I think a lot of kids who do grow up Catholic, who don't understand why they're going to Catholic Mass, they fall out of Catholicism and kind of like they drop out and they stop going to church because they don't understand why they're going. So the key lesson to take away here is you should start, if you already don't, you should start trying to understand and learn more about Catholicism, about Catholic Mass and why you're going. Because if you want to be a faithful and devoted Catholic and follower of Christ, then understanding why you go to Catholic Mass and church in the first place is something that should be at the top of your list of things to do. Now, the third mistake that I made was I was living out my faith as if it was just a bunch of rules. And I kind of touched up on this in a previous video, but some of the things I did was I would pray because I felt like I had to. I would give thanks and pray before I eat because I felt like I had to. I would go to Catholic church and Catholic Mass because I felt like I had to, and a lot of other things because I felt like I had to. Following God is not just a bunch of rules. It's not like having a checklist where you're trying to tick all the boxes or trying to do X, Y, Z, ABC things just so you can go to heaven. And I think a lot of people have this kind of mindset, and even I, up until quite recently, had this kind of mindset where I was just doing things because I felt like I had to, because that's what it meant to follow God, is you have to tick all the boxes. You gotta go to church, you gotta like do this and do that and pray before you eat. But in doing this, we're missing the whole point. What Jesus wants is for us to love him. And that's why love is the greatest command. Because in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 5, it says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." And then in John chapter 14 verse 15, it says, "If you love me, keep my commands." So we don't do all these things like going to Mass, going to church, and praying and reading the Bible and giving thanks just because we feel like we have to, or just so we can go to heaven. That's missing the whole point. We do all these things and we ought to do these things because we love God. We should love God because that's his greatest command. And by loving God, that's how we get to heaven. And when I started to actually try to put on this mindset of trying to love God more, it kind of lifted a weight off my heart. And now it didn't feel like I was doing these things because I felt like I was obligated to do them. Now I'm doing these things because I love God. And there's a very huge difference between doing something because you feel like you have to and doing something because you want to, because you love God. Okay, so then you might be asking, how can we love God more? Well, some obvious answers would be praying and spending more time with him, but you can think about it like this. If you had a friend or someone in your life that you're trying to get closer to and that you're trying to love more, what would you do? You would spend more time with them. You would try and call them and text them and make the time to spend time with them, right? That's what you would do for someone you're trying to get closer to. And that's the same thing with God. If we want to love God more and try and get closer to him and build a relationship with him, we would make the time to spend time with him. We would do things that even if it inconveniences us, we would do it because we love him and because we want to spend time with him. For example, when you wake up in the morning and you feel tired, instead of, going back to sleep, you can go and pray and spend time with God. And doing that, it shows that you do love God, because even though you feel like going back to sleep, even though it's hard, you're still doing it because you're doing it for God, and it shows you love God. And so let's think about this. If you go to church every week, right? But outside of church, for the rest of the week, you don't spend any time with God. You don't pray, you don't give thanks, you don't read the Bible or try and learn more about God. What does that show? It shows that you don't really love God, because why? You don't prioritize him. It's kind of like that friend who only calls you when they need something, and then outside of that, they basically don't talk to you, like, at all. And it shows that they're not really your friend if they only talk to you when they need something from you. And that's the same with God. If we only spend time with God, let's say at church, or we only talk to God when we need him or when we want something or desire something, we're kind of being that friend who only comes to you when they need something. And we don't want to be that kind of person for God. And so to put it simply, if we want to love God more, we ought to try and spend more time with him and do things that might be hard for us, but we're doing it for God. And that's how you can love God more. We make sacrifices. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful and that you enjoyed it, and I hope you can avoid making these same mistakes that I previously made. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.